My name's Cliff. I'm a postdoctoral researcher here at the University of Pennsylvania. But before I tell you anything about what I study, and believe me, that's one of my favorite things to do, first I want you to take part in a quick thought experiment for me. Specifically, I want you to imagine that you're out for a stroll late one evening, and during your stroll you happen across a pretty unusual sight. You see Scar from Disney's The Lion King as he disappears down a dark alleyway. And you follow closely behind, see him slip through a doorway, and you peer through this, and you find that Scar, he's not alone. He's actually deep in conversation with Voldemort and Freddy Krueger and Emperor Palpatine and Two-Face. You may have noticed that one common thread linking these people together is that they're all villains in their own worlds. And that's true, but there's a second common thread that I'm very curious to know whether or not you picked up on, which is that each of these people has a facial anomaly. It's observations like this that have prompted us to wonder, are beauty and morality related to each other? And if they are, how are they related? In a series of ongoing studies, our group has sought to provide answers to both of these questions across different levels of organization. At the level of the brain, for instance, we've found that looking at faces with visible differences results in blunted activation in a part of the brain that has been implicated in dehumanizing outgroup members. Furthermore, the same brain area has been shown to link aesthetic and moral judgments. Alternatively, though, it could be that rather than reflecting a marker of dehumanization, that this part of the brain tracks beauty or just the salience of looking at people with different kinds of faces. We've also looked at attitudes with respect to people who have facial differences, and we found that, not shockingly, people aren't particularly happy to tell you if they're biased against people with facial differences. However, when you change the question and you ask them instead what kinds of personality traits they would predict people with facial differences to have, we see a different story. We find that people assign far poorer characteristics to people who are facially different. We also find that people who are facially typical demonstrate robust implicit biases against people with facial differences. These are biases of which they are completely unaware. The final frontier is behavior, but I have to be honest, we don't know much about actual behavior towards people with facial differences. Now, we know that there's good evidence for the psychosocial consequences of mistreatment, but we don't really know how this behavior emerges, what its causes and consequences are, and we don't understand how it relates to levels like that of the brain and of attitudes. So we're currently conducting research where we will integrate all of these features. So we will ask people to answer questions about their biases, but we'll also ask them to play some games where we'll assess their moral behavior. So for instance, we'll give them a pot of money and we'll ask them how much they want to split with somebody who has facial differences. But they're not obligated to split anything. So this provides an index of how prosocial people might behave towards the facially different. We also use a game, it's called the ultimatum experiment. It's very similar to the one that I just described, except participants in our study actually play as receivers. So they receive some amount of money, but they have the option to reject that money if they think it's unfair. And when they do make that rejection, nobody receives anything. And so this provides us with a measure of antisociality. And then we can actually relate that to neural responses to facial differences. We're currently doing that in a study specifically designed to help us understand whether the brain responses to facial differences are better associated with beauty or with salience or some other feature altogether. And we find very exciting preliminary results. We see, again, blunted activation in the same region. And very exciting future direction for our research will be to examine whether or not this pattern of activation that we're finding predicts behavior, whether it predicts attitudes. And this will enable us to better understand how to stand up against discrimination. Thank you.